Okay, so nice to meet you. This is, oh wait, all right. It's being weird. All right, so this is teaching English content to ESL students, and this is a very practical class, especially because I suspect that a lot of you here already have a lot of teaching experience, or maybe you have some under your belt. So you've come to the master's program to sort of improve yourself and you know, for your own personal self-growth and professional development. So before we even begin this journey, I know that it's important that you kind of get a sense at who I am. Who is this young person who is talking to me on the other side, and does she know what she's talking about, basically? So I'm gonna start talking about who I am, and then I'm gonna ask you to talk a little bit about you, and hopefully then, because we're such a small class, we will feel more at ease and comfortable with each other. Okay? Yeah? Okay. All right. So my name is Catherine
Yes.
Morales. Thank you. My name is Dr. Catherine Morales. I am from Mayagüez, Puerto Rico. What do I do? I am a professor here at Cambridge College, but also at the University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez. I'm a full-time professor there. What do I specialize in? What did I study? I did a PhD in bilingualism and linguistics, and I did all of my studies abroad. So I guess that's something interesting about me. So I did my graduate degree in Europe, in Ireland, and in Scotland. So I completed my master's in Scotland in applied linguistics, and my PhD in English linguistics with a focus on bilingualism and second language acquisition. Anyway, so that's me. I understand English language education from perhaps a more technical perspective than some of you are familiarized with. Maybe a lot of you are more on the pedagogy side, which is fine. I also have teaching experience teaching English. So yeah, so that's my background. That's who I am, and I've been studying bilingualism in Puerto Rico for many years, even though I look young. And three interesting things about me. I think that I studied in Europe, so I lived all of my 20s in Europe. And I have a dog named Coco, and I like baking. All right, so introduce yourself, and I want to know your names, the town where you're from, the languages you speak, the classes you teach or have taught, and three interesting things about you. Let's start with, let me see, who do I have here? Let's start with Brenda, and then share your screen again. Brenda.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Anyone here, I used to see them in other classes, so we know a little bit about each other. So my name is Brenda Sandos. I'm originally from New York. I was raised in Nahuabo, Puerto Rico, and now I live in Toa Alta. I've been teaching English as a second language for about, this year is the 11th year. And I have two beautiful kids, 20 and 16. And nothing else I can say. Right now I'm teaching elementary school English at the Julio Resi Bayamón, and that's it.
That's good. That's very interesting. And also good that you have all that experience teaching English. That means that you'll have a good insight to bring to the table. May I ask if it's been in private school or public
Yes,
school?
and my experience was in private and now in the Department of Education,
That's
both.
perfect. That's great. We'll learn a lot from you. Thank you very much. All right, let's see. Who's next?
Thank you.
Who wants to volunteer next? Nobody wants to talk about themselves. Ask to unmute. I can't
Okay,
see
so
your mute.
I can volunteer.
Okay, Jose, go ahead.
Okay, hi. Yeah, the thing is that there was a tab that appeared and it was like unmute. The whole would let. Now I'm like, okay. So I know all the students that are here as well. Glad to see you guys
But I don't know
once
you,
again.
so I want you to talk to me about you.
So my name is Jose Andres Rios. No, no, no. That's exactly why I said students. So I'm natively from San Juan. I've always lived here. I speak English, I speak Spanish, and I know a basic Portuguese. Um, I began teaching at August the 31st in Copevio School. This is my first time, my first experience teaching English as a second language. And three interesting things about me. Well, I like to talk a lot. I like the beach, and I'm seriously hoping that this COVID-19 just fades away for the sake of us teachers and virtual teaching.
I understand you 100%.
So yeah, that's me.
Okay, nice to meet you. And you said that you teach, this is your first time teaching at Comerio?
No, Copevio. Copevio School.
Oh, Coupe. All right. And so your first experience teaching is online. That's difficult.
Yes, it's been quite hectic. Yeah, it is. It is. It's very, I mean, the students make it a lot better, but it's a very hectic experience, but it's not impossible. We can do it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right, nice to meet you. Thank you so much. Okay, next. I'm gonna ask somebody else to unmute. Ask to unmute.
I can do it right now.
All right, Vivian, go ahead.
Yes, well, as you know, my name is Vivian. I'm from Bayamón, Puerto Rico. I've been teaching English almost 9 years. From first grade to 11th grade. Now I'm teaching 11th grade in Bayamón. And three interesting things about me. I have 3 kids. One is a nurse. The other one is a student at UPR, and the other one, the little one, is a student, my son. I have a husband and my dog named Lola. So
That's
that's
nice.
it. And I'm going to graduate this, I hope, December.
You will. That's great.
Yes.
It's really good that you have a dog during COVID, and also, to have family and people around, because it's such a difficult time.
Yes.
But also, I can't imagine that it's hard being a parent and also teaching, right?
Yes. I'm being a student too.
Yes, triple work and a wife. All right, but anyway, so you said you teach Bayamón, Área Metro, for 9 years?
Well, I taught in Toa Baja first. Now I'm teaching in Bayamón, in a high school in Bayamón. Yes.
So English only?
Yes.
And to the people that I've asked before that you teach English, what level of English do you teach? Like elementary school or high school?
I started in elementary school. Then I moved to secondary school. So from first grade to 11th.
That's good. So you have both experiences. Y Jose.
So you're asking me what grade I teach,
Yeah.
Professor?
Yeah.
I am currently teaching 8th grade, 9th grade, and 9th grade honors.
Okay, so high school. And
Yes.
Brenda, you said you're now with the Department of Education, but that you previously taught.
Elementary school, boy, I have teach on a private college, private school, up to 9th grade.
Tonight.
So I have taken students from pre-kinder from 9th grade.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yes,
You have to do a lot of teaching prep for that. That's
yes.
crazy.
But
How
it
did
was
you do
nice.
that?
It is nice experience.
Yeah. Hopefully you had people help you because that's insane, all that teaching prep for all of those classes.
Yes, yes.
All right. And Vivian, we just had your introduction, so ahora Sigmari. Tell me a little bit about you.
Hi, my name is Sigmari Mendez. I'm from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I speak English and language in Spanish. I want to learn how to speak Portuguese, but later. I'm actually not a teacher. Yeah, one at a time. I'm not a teacher, actually. I studied business administration on the UPR Carolina, so I have no teaching background.
That's okay.
And I'll learn, it's fine. So 3 interesting things. I have a 4-year-old son, which is interesting with online classes. Preschool has been, well, I'm being a teacher now, basically. I'm a self-proclaimed crazy cat lady. I have 2 cats. And I love Halloween, mainly because it's my birthday, but I love Halloween.
Halloween is a really good holiday and it's coming up very soon. It'll give you something to decorate the house with during COVID. It's nice to make it cozy.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of pumpkins and skulls everywhere.
Yeah. I recently made Halloween cookies. Anyway, all right. So Lisandra.
Well, hello. I think I know almost everyone, except for you, Professor, and I think Vivian. But my name is Lisandra Carrasquillo. I'm naturally from Loíza, but bought a house 2 years ago, so now I live in Carolina. I speak English and Spanish and Spanglish. And yeah, I know. I can say that I know a few words in French. Like I know how to say that I don't speak French. That's good. Oh, you have a dog.
Yeah. You can see my dog.
I saw it for a second. I taught I only have like 1 year in experience, and the one that's currently last year I taught science and math, but it was in English. And this year, that was in a private school. This year, I actually got to the department, to the public school system, and I'm actually teaching math from 6th grade to 8th grade. Yeah, something different. And 3 interesting things about me. Well, I have a daughter. She's 7. I can say that, what else? Oh, I love anime. I'm sorry. I do watch anime. For all of you that didn't know, I love anime. Like we are a family that watch anime and play video games, including my daughter. She loves anime too. And the 13, I learned how to make soap during the quarantine. So I think that's it. Professor, you're on mute.
Soap is very interesting. So, like, do you sell the soap?
I have sold us a few, and yes, and it is really interesting because you need to know, because it's cold process soap, something different. I was like, I only thought about soap about melt and pour, but then I found about cold process soap that I have to measure everything and mix the chemical and work with everything and colors, and but it was interesting. I think the one that has seen like almost all my soaps is Sigmari.
Yeah, I think that's a really good hobby to pick up. I think this is the time to pick up if you're not super busy, to pick up other things to do.
I wasn't. Now I am. Now I'm busy. And I'm like, I make soap like once every 2 weeks.
Well, you do what you can. But definitely, I think that your background in math will be very good to have in this class, because so far, from what I'm understanding from most of the people that have spoken, you have experience teaching English class, right? Like English class. And this is our first other subjects teacher, math teacher. So that background is gonna help for the content of this course for certain. So you will see very soon. All right, now we have Aisha.
Yes, hi, my name is
Sorry.
Aisha. Yeah.
Let me mute my microphone, but go ahead.
Okay. My name is Aisha Hussein. I'm from Lajas, Puerto Rico. I'm living here in Orlando, Florida now. I speak English and Spanish, you know, I defend myself. I was working like for a few months like a science teacher. Then, you know, with the pandemic, we had to do the classes online, and now they opened the school here in Orlando face to face. But since I have like a asthmatic condition, I cannot go back. So I'm staying here doing like working online. The three interesting things gonna be I have 3 girls, I have 2 dogs that I bring from Puerto Rico, 2 dos satos, and I love dogs.
So you said that you worked for a science teacher for a little while.
Yes.
And that was in Lajas.
No, in Orlando.
In Orlando. So right now you are in Puerto Rico. So you have
No, in
that
Orlando.
teaching, huh?
No,
Oh, yeah.
no, I live here in Orlando.
Okay. So you have teaching experience abroad. So
Yes.
on the mainland. That's good. So did you have any teaching experience prior? So in Puerto Rico?
No, only here.
That's good. So you'll be able to give us that sort of insight as to how it works over there. Okay, so it's good. We have a kind of diverse class, even though, you know, we're quite small. And then I could talk about my experiences teaching Chinese students, maybe. All right, so let's begin with the syllabus. So if you go to your CC, I hope that you've already visited our webpage. How many of you have visited the webpage?
Yes, I visited.
All right, so I'm just gonna share it with you guys. Again, this is just kind of like logistics. So here's our webpage. Right, so there's an intro video here. You can find, I'm gonna do the US students. syllabus. And I do have the syllabus already. Right, so here, this is the wrong one. One moment. Here we go. These are our live dates. So we have today from 1:30 to 3:25. Then the next time we meet is a Sunday, and it's in the morning, and then Sunday after that. So this is the only Saturday that we meet in the afternoon, which is unfortunate because it's such a nice time to meet. But the other times are Sundays, and you have your online forum discussions already projected on the screen for in the in-between time when we don't meet. So you will be assigned some chapters to read on your own, so a sort of independent study, and you will be given some key questions for you to discuss in a forum. And as you know, or you probably have experience with, when you participate in the forum, you answer the questions or the essay prompts that are given to you, but you're also expected to reply to somebody else's post at least 3 times to receive full marks, so the whole grade. So in these 2 occasions, that's what you'll be expected to do. You'll be expected to go to the forum and post your own opinion and then comment on at least 3 of your classmates' posts. And here's the link for the class. So this course is about basically provides educators working with second language learners a theoretical and practical framework for integrating academic language development into content area instruction. What does this mean? So basically this course is about teaching academic English, but it's not the kind of academic English that many of you are familiarized with. So perhaps a lot of you here have taught an English class, an ordinary English class that involves teaching grammar and the rules of language as a system. Or even if you're in high school, well, you teach literature, right? And the different movements in literature and poetry and so on. But this class is really about making English language teaching more interdisciplinary. So breaking away from the traditional boundaries that we put our English class in and trying to make our English class more practical and more applicable to students' everyday lives. And that's a really important thing to do because a lot of the times in a language class, some students may lose interest. Not everybody is fascinated by English language arts, or, you know, think about your Spanish class and how engaged you were. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't. But the idea here is that we want to make a learning experience that is more meaningful and that students can, you know, take away knowledge, and not just English knowledge, but world knowledge. So this class emphasizes the idea of teaching English through teaching content, contenido, and content meaning any content. So even away from the traditional English language classroom themes. Okay, so that's what this class is about. And it'll give you some tools and some helpful checklists and handouts so that you can perhaps begin to envision a classroom that looks like this, that looks more holistic. And some of the objectives are to differentiate between language acquisition versus language learning. So there's a lot of reference to the processes of language learning or acquisition, the cognitive processes. We will discuss some theories of language acquisition, but not so much. We'll focus mostly on the pedagogical side. we'll discuss teaching and assessing students and how to facilitate and encourage students' higher order thinking skills, so critical thinking, and create activities that connect with them. This is a really big part of this class. Analyze language demands of content and apply. This is the framework that we're going to be using for this class. The name is CALLA. So it's a cognitive approach to language learning. And basically identify strategies to how we can facilitate the learning environment for students. So those are the objectives. This is your course book. So it's available on Amazon. It takes a while to be delivered, but it doesn't take more than a month. And because this is a semester that's quite long, it's not a summer semester, I would encourage you, if you can, to purchase it, but it's a bit on the expensive side. I also have PDF handouts available. So if you don't want to purchase it and you just want to highlight whatever relevant in your iPad or tablet or computer, that's fine. But if you want to own it after reading the first couple of chapters, you can purchase it as well. And yeah, so what you will need is reliable internet for this class, computer, access to Microsoft Office, PowerPoint. And if you have any problems, always let me know. Here's the point breakdown, the point system breakdown. So as you see, there's an attendance grade. I will be sending a rubric once this class is over so that you can know how you will be assessed in terms of your attendance. And most of the exercises are analytical or forum, with the exception of our last module. In our last module, I'm gonna ask you guys to sort of do a mock class following what we discussed in this course. And as you know, this course follows the benchmark that if you get anything below an 83, you fail, so. And you know the course policies. If you have any learning disabilities, you let me know, and also reach out to the necessary people in place for that in Cambridge College, the counselor. All right? Are we good? So also after this class,
Yes.
thank you. And also after this class, I'm gonna be sending a more detailed syllabus that is 14 pages long. In the syllabus, you will see specifically the homeworks that you will have for each module. So it'll have all of the questions, okay? All right, so let's begin with our content. All right. So this is our book. That's how it looks like, the CALLA handbook. Photocopies available through the website, through our MyCC. Okay, so in this lesson, this is module 1, we will introduce the subject of teaching English through teaching content and highlight the historical origin of the idea of teaching English through content and how it's motivated by a lot of theories of language acquisition, such as theories from cognitive science, so cognition to do with your brain, but also theories to do with the best or most successful language learner. So it's basically how to do evidence-based teaching. So how to adapt our language class according to research or previous findings, what previous findings tell us about how we learn things and how we remember things, right? So the objectives for this class are that we will discuss some of the ESL and CALLA terminology, and we will discuss what CALLA is as a framework, the 3 components of the CALLA framework, and the different types of knowledge and memory that CALLA tries to target or address, because we have different ways of memorizing things and retaining information. So this framework that is proposed in this class talks about how we retain information. It also talks about learning strategies. So what learning strategies can we instruct to our students that can help them become better English language learners. And 4 reasons for teaching English through content. So CALLA stands for the Cognitive Academic Language Learning Approach. It is pronounced as CALLA, even though, unfortunately, if you were to read it in Spanish, it sounds like calla, like shut up. So it could have negative associations with foreign language students or Spanish-speaking students. So as you know, when we say that someone's an English learner and an English language learner, we're referring to a student who learns English as a new language, right? An English learner is somebody that's not a native speaker of English. It's somebody who's learning English as a second language, as a third language. So it may be at any stage in their life when they learn English, or they would classify it as an English learner. An English learner can be somebody who's 4 years old or 5 years old entering school, or it could be somebody who's learning it later as an adult. It's a very vague, broad, abstract concept that encompasses all kinds of competences and language learners. But it's one that we use nevertheless. So, types of instruction for learners of English, we have many. You might have heard of ESL, English as a second language. We also have ESOL, which is English for speakers of other languages. SDAIE, specially designed academic instruction in English. And HILT, high intensity language training. Sounds like when you do exercise HIIT. Okay, so these programs that are in existence today all provide intensive English language instruction during the first years of a student's English language acquisition. So they focus on intense instruction at the beginning. So students in these programs are referred to ESL students. So other important terminology, whenever we say that somebody has a first language, home language, or native language, we're referring to somebody that speaks the language natively or learned it from their parents. Okay, so somebody's first language is your mother tongue. You learned it from your mom or your dad. When we talk about linguistically and culturally diverse students, we're talking about basically, this is a really silly term, but we don't have this term in Puerto Rico. This term is in existence in the United States. Anyone who's linguistically or culturally diverse is basically anyone who doesn't speak English, okay? So those are the linguistically and culturally diverse people. It's a very racial label. Anyway, and content subject teachers, this is an important terminology for our class, content subject teachers. These are the teachers that specialize in a particular content area. So not necessarily English language arts, although an English language teacher is a content teacher, but a mathematics teacher is also a content teacher. Someone who specializes in the sciences is also a content teacher, and a history and social studies teacher is also a content teacher. So we're all different content teachers, and we specialize in a specific area. So most content subject teachers are in secondary level. So it's often the case that in elementary school, you have your one teacher, and that one teacher instructs or teaches basically a lot of the subjects to their homeroom. So the idea of somebody that specializes in a particular area is something that is especially enforced in secondary. And there are also content specialists at elementary level too, but it's mostly something that's seen in secondary. General education, it's the curriculum and instruction designed for native English speaking students. So again, this terminology is specific to US mainland context. So the same way that we talk about anyone being linguistically diverse, general education is a term for the US. Content area, content subject refers to subjects of the curriculum such as science, mathematics, history, social sciences, and language arts. So we already discussed that. All right. History of CALLA. What is CALLA? The Cognitive Academic Language Learning Approach. That's what it means. So it's an instructional model. It's designed to meet the needs of English language learners in elementary and secondary schools. So it's something, you know, as the title of this class, teaching English content to students from grades K to 12. So it's not something that's just applicable or relevant to somebody in secondary school, but it's something that we probably want to also enforce to younger students. And in fact, it could help a lot of younger students and motivate a lot of younger students who don't find English class interesting to teach English by teaching English through something else, all right? So some of you, for instance, mentioned that you like video games and anime in your household. So you could teach English through that, maybe through subtitles, right? If your particular class also likes anime. So the cognitive academic language learning approach was developed in the US by Shamat, who is the author of our book, and others. And it's aimed at helping and aiding linguistically and culturally diverse students. So the non-English language learner, basically. So in the United States, in some regions, linguistically diverse cultural student populations make up the majority of the students. And this is often the case in places like California, where the majority of the students are probably from Latino origin, Florida, New York. These are culturally diverse places, Boston, right? In Puerto Rico, however, we know that we're dealing with a different situation, and we have a different kind of linguistically diverse population. And because we have a different kind of linguistically diverse population, we really want to know how we have to think about how to facilitate this population in English language learning. So historically, we've encountered difficulties in learning English as a second language in Puerto Rico. There have been linguistic gaps documented in the acquisition of English as second language by ESL students. Reasons for this difficulty, according to Shamat, in the US, this is in US context. So in US context, a lot of foreign students have difficulties learning English because they say that the classes don't meet the needs of the foreign students or don't address the needs, cultural needs of students. So there's a cultural mismatch between the majority culture around them, which is Anglo or English speaking, and their own home culture. So they don't feel represented or acknowledged or welcomed. So it's often a hostile environment for the English language learner in the United States. For us in Puerto Rico, it's a different kind of hostile environment, right? It's almost one that learning English is sometimes even seen by some as an option, even though it shouldn't be seen as an option, as we know, but that English can provide a lot of great opportunities for us as islanders in Puerto Rico, opportunities of professional improvement, and also to succeed in today's global world that relies so much on English in business, in medicine, in science, in law, in education. So if we don't know English, we're basically not keeping up with the world. So, it's something that we want to help our students have this opportunity to be able to live in this world. It's the way that it is, but in the US, there's failure to provide initial cognitive and linguistic success in the first language. This is also a problem that perhaps Aisha can talk to us about perhaps later on, that some of the difficulties is not only the mismatch in the United States between the student's background and what's taught in schools, but also that they don't help the students retain sometimes their first language. So oftentimes what happens in the United States is that by the time that a student is third generation, that their family has been there for a while, they don't speak their heritage language. They don't speak Spanish or whatever, they forgot, right? So there's like a failure on many sides. There's a failure to accommodate to them and their linguistic and cultural background. And there's also a failure to encourage them to retain their ethnic and cultural practices. So it's a very hostile and difficult environment for the ESL student in the United States. They say there's an inadequacy in the curriculum, instruction, and on the professional development of teachers. Again, a lot of people often rely on blaming the teachers. And I think that, especially in Puerto Rico, there's so many factors at play, and people always think about blaming the teacher first. Maybe that's something that we could talk about in the future. So how does this compare to Puerto Rico? So Spanish is the first language in Puerto Rico, and we know this according to numerous census statistics in the past decades. 80% of Puerto Ricans claim that they don't speak English fluently. Or in terms of census statistics, they use the word very well. They don't speak English very well. Whatever very well means. Is very well referring to spoken? Is it referring to written language? Is it referring to hearing and understanding? We don't know, because census statistics are not a test. They're just categories that are reduced. Okay, they don't really tell us much about bilingualism in Puerto Rico. So this number, we don't really know what it means, basically. But what we do know is that Puerto Rico has been under US influence for over a century. So since 1898, you know, when it became a US territory, when it became under the dominion of the United States, English was present till today. And there have been subsequent changes in language policy as well. So language policy at a national level, language policy at the educational level, at public school level. There have been many different changes and shifts in our language policy until the 1950s, when people finally decided that Spanish would be the language of instruction and English would be the only class to teach from grades K to 12. But before that, the language policy changed like 8 times, many times. I don't know if you know that. Did you know that? Brenda is nodding yes, I know that. I'm in the Department of Education.
I personally didn't.
Huh? Sorry? Jose, you said something?
No, I personally didn't. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I personally didn't know that. And it's super curious to me that in 1993, English and Spanish were considered in the same standard. I really didn't, I've never seen it like that.
On a national level, when it happened, it was always for political reasons, that some party came into power and then they decided that they were gonna change our language policy.
Yeah.
Ay, Puerto Rico. All right, let's continue sharing. But all of this affects us, right? Because right now, most of us, or most of you, have public school teaching experience. So it especially affects the public school teacher, because you're against so much when you're teaching English. You're literally perhaps the only exposure a student is getting that day to learning English as a second language. Whereas private school is better at the whole teaching English through content idea, because especially if we're talking about bilingual or immersion schools, you know, they'll have English in other subjects as well. So all of this really helps in the language learning process. So CALLA, the CALLA method. The CALLA method is said to be a holistic response to this linguistic problem. We have visitors. Hello. So the cat, do I stop?
No, estamos integrando poco a poco, están llegando poquito a poco, están entrando todos. ¿Cómo están todos? ¿Bien? Qué bueno que están aquí. Por ahí viene doctor Méndez, que creo que le entró una llamada, así que estamos... Si desea puede seguir su
Saludos.
clase, ahí está entrando.
Hello, Dr. Catherine Morales. How you doing today?
Hello, I'm
This
doing very
afternoon.
good.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Oh, you are only smiling, but oh, your connection is some kind of weak. Okay. Do you have Liberty or Claro in there in Mayagüez?
Claro.
What do you have?
Claro.
Claro. Oh, that's why. Okay, then let me say hi to everybody here. Lisandra, how you feel? Fine?
Pretty good, and you, sir?
Sigmari?
Hi, I'm good.
Thanks to God. Aisha?
Hi, I'm good.
Aisha,
Thank you.
I have a friend in Mayagüez that has the same last name as you. Hussein. From Mayagüez.
Hussein? Yeah, I'm from Lajas.
Ah,
Yeah.
ok, Vivian es nuestra amiga que la vimos ahorita, ya cambié a español, ¿viste, Vivian? Our friend José Ríos Díaz, how you feel?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Great. Nada, saludándolos. Hay una nueva tutora de ESL que se llama Yarixi, no está aquí. Hay algo nuevo que estoy implementando en la universidad, es que al menos cada 2 semanas ella los llama a usted para saber cómo ustedes están. Ustedes empezaron en verano, no saben cómo somos nosotros realmente. Nosotros nos parábamos yo me paraba en la recepción, por ejemplo, todas las mañanas para saludar a los estudiantes uno a uno. Nosotros inclusive le abríamos la puerta, si había necesidad de abrir la puerta, los ayudábamos. Esa es la esencia de cómo realmente es Cambridge. No sé si José tiene una idea de cómo es Cambridge. José Río, ¿tú te acordabas de esos procesos aquí o tú nunca llegaste a venir? José.
La verdad es que no llegué a ver esos procesos yo.
Pero nosotros somos completamente distintos, humanitarios, pero aquí van a aprender. Aquí no se regala nota, es lo que yo siempre digo. La gente le está raro cuando yo digo eso, pero que no te da nota. Yo sé, yo he trabajado en muchas universidades y a mí me interesa que usted vaya bien preparado para los sitios, para que nos haga quedar bien. No me gusta el preparar aquí.
La mamá de José estudió con nosotros, doctor Méndez, Ani Díaz.
Ah, sí, me acuerdo, sí.
Yo creo que ella sí pasó por ese proceso de...
Que nosotros por la mañana y qué sé yo. Así que la parte humana se estaba perdiendo un poco con esto de las cámaras, que estoy loco que Dios, ¿verdad? Orando para que Dios quite lo del COVID, que puedan ustedes venir otra vez y por lo menos verlos, saludarlos, preguntarles cómo está su familia, porque eso es parte de un proceso cuando uno está estudiando de adulto, que hagan sentir a uno como caramba, alguien se preocupa por uno. A tal efecto, tengo esta idea y ustedes me corrigen si no le está bueno, me lo dicen, pero la nueva tutora que se llama Yarixi Martínez, Patricia, tú tienes el número de Yarixi, pónselo en el chat. Yarixi va a estar llamándola a ustedes por lo menos cada 2 semanas, solamente para saber cómo usted está. Y si ahí usted necesita algo de Yarixi, pues Yarixi va a estar disponible para ayudarlos en ESL. No esperar que usted nos llame, porque a lo mejor me dijeron en el otro grupo que había que se avergonzaban. Ustedes escucharon eso, Alex, tú escuchaste eso, que al otro grupo dijeron que se le da vergüenza a los estudiantes pedir servicios de nosotros. No debería ser. Entonces,
no quieren molestar.
Y no quieren molestar, eso me estuvo bien raro. Así que yo le voy a preguntar a ustedes ahora, que gracias a la doctora Morales, antes de presentar a la doctora Morales, si a ustedes les parecen que esa idea mía loca que se me ha ocurrido, de que Yarixi los llame a ustedes, aunque ustedes no la llamen, para saber cómo ustedes están y si necesitan algo, ¿le parece bien o le parece una falta de una pérdida de tiempo? Brenda, ¿qué tú piensas de esa idea?
Sí, para mí es muy buena porque ahora mismo yo me pongo, ¿verdad? Me visualizo yo dando clases, pendiente a mis hijos que estén cogiendo sus clases y tal vez llega el momento y lo que hago es que me siento a organizarme, a hacer, a organizarme en todas mis tareas y no pienso, ¿verdad? No tengo ni en lo más remoto pensar en llamar a nadie que me ayude. Si recibo esa llamada, pues ya, ¿verdad? Ese follow-up, pues ella me está ayudando en ese proceso y aprovecho en la llamada y esas dudas que tengo, ¿verdad? Pues ella me podría ayudar. Para mí sería muy bueno.
José, ¿te parece mala idea? Dime la verdad. Si le parece mala idea, a mí no me molesta. Yo estoy tratando de ver si ustedes cómo ustedes lo acogen o si ustedes me dan alguna recomendación. O sea que no me va a estar malo si me dicen, no, esto para nosotros no vale la pena, una pérdida de tiempo. Lo voy a aceptar. Dime, José.
La verdad es que hay que tomar en consideración que todo el mundo tiene circunstancias diversas aquí y un tutor o una tutora siempre viene bien. Y bueno, para eso están los tutores y las tutoras, que pienso que la disposición es importante.
Carissa te llama para saludarte, no te va a estar mal. Lo contrario,
No, para nada, al contrario. A mí en lo personal me va a hacer sentir bastante seguro.
Tal vez, mister, tal vez a veces a las personas se nos hace difícil decirlo, ay, me están llamando, no puedo contestar, pues tal vez un mensaje acordando, mira, te voy a estar llamando en media hora, te voy a estar llamando a la 1 y
Sí,
más pendiente. Antes de la llamada, ese mensaje de alerta.
Ok, gracias, Brenda. Te estaba escuchando, pero estoy también coordinando acá con el equipo. Le estoy diciendo a Patricia que anote ese detalle, que le diga, mira, te voy a estar llamando, un texto previo, te voy a estar llamando. Eso nadie nos lo había dicho primero. ¿Ok? Para que así, si la persona que no la coja tampoco, como que de sorpresa me te voy a estar llamando para saber cómo están las cosas. Yo creo que eso hay que añadirse a la cosa. Vivian, ¿qué te parece? Tú llevas tiempito con nosotros, o este es tu segundo semestre, si no me equivoco.
No, se supone, si Dios quiere, que yo me gradúe en diciembre ya.
Sí.
Pero me parece buena idea porque para mí, nosotros los estudiantes de Cambridge no somos un número. Siempre ustedes nos han dado ese tú a tú en el servicio y siempre que necesitamos han estado ahí. Y pues no estamos presencial, que yo sí vi cómo doctor Méndez pues nos recibe cuando nosotros llegamos a la universidad, va por los salones, todo bien, estoy por ahí y las demás personas también. Así que esa llamadita, ese texto nunca viene mal.
Gracias por decírmelo. Aisha, ¿qué me dices tú de esa idea?
Pues sí, para mí sería estupendo porque yo soy de las personas que como que no me gusta llamar para no molestar, que si estoy molestando, pues si ella llama, pues sí, sería fantástico para mí.
Si alguien te está acompañando en esta maestría, alguien te está dando, aunque tú no la necesites, simplemente esa llamadita te hace sentir bien.
Exacto, sí.
Sigmari, gracias, Aisha. ¿Qué tú piensas, Sigmari?
Estoy de acuerdo y me gusta mucho lo que dijo Brenda sobre el mensaje, porque hay veces pues que tal vez uno no tiene el celular encima o está haciendo alguna cosa y como que ese reminder de que mira, te voy a llamar, estaría chévere y la llamada pues sería buena porque es como que un empujoncito a uno recordarse que uno tiene que hacer ciertas cosas, uno organizarse y tener esa ayuda en realidad es bueno.
No sería de molestia, tú no verías, ay, esta gente de Cambridge molestándome. No,
y no la necesito, pues le digo, hola, buenas tardes, no te necesito, gracias.
Ok. Lisandra, ¿qué tú piensas?
Yo encuentro que es una excelente idea, porque a pesar de que pues entre compañeros nos tratamos de ayudar, es bueno tener un tutor siempre cerca como que para saber, porque hay veces que el compañero no te puede ayudar, necesitas un refuerzo y sería perfecto. Igual como dijo compañero Brenda y Sigmari, por lo menos un mensaje de texto, porque a veces le puedes escribir como que te voy a llamar, pero a cierta hora para ver si uno está disponible. Y así cualquier cosa uno hace el arreglo.
Y lo mejor también, yo pienso que algo bueno que ocurre es que ella fue estudiante de Cambridge, así que ella sabe cómo trabajan los profesores, el estilo de lo que la universidad exige, así que quién mejor que un estudiante o un exalumno de la universidad que te guíe en el proceso.
Bueno, pues entonces voy a proceder a presentar a un excelente recurso. Me refiero a la doctora Catherine Morales Lugo. La doctora Catherine Morales Lugo, usted la ve así jovencita, nosotros nos equivocamos. Pensábamos que era muy jovencita, pero el bagaje que tiene la doctora no lo tiene la mayoría de los profesores de inglés en Puerto Rico, porque ella viene de dar clases en una universidad muy prestigiosa en Europa. ¿Ya se lo digo a ustedes? ¿Le habló de eso? Si alguien me trae una profesora que tenga bagaje así, de trabajar en una universidad de lingüística de Europa, viene para que yo le dé 20 pesos. Ahora mismo, ¿ok? Porque no la hay. Mira que yo he recibido currículum vitae aquí y la doctora viene de trabajar. ¿Cómo se llama esa universidad que tú trabajaste que era de high standing allá en Europa?
En Trinity College, Dublin. En Dublín.
En Dublín, exacto. Así, y es colega mía en lo que yo siempre me siento orgulloso, el Colegio de Mayagüez, en el programa de inglés, pero no solamente a nivel de bachillerato, ella también está en esta misma maestría en el Colegio de Mayagüez. Así que ustedes deben sacarle el mejor provecho. A Catherine Morales es un ser humano espectacular, humilde, buena persona, y eso es más que alguien que tenga mucha preparación y taconé por ahí. Me gusta la gente así, yo soy de campo. Me gusta la gente que aunque tengan mucha preparación, que vivan en el piso, que tengan sensibilidad humana. Así que mientras Dios me tenga aquí dirigiendo esta universidad, esos es los recursos que yo voy a buscar y que le damos la bienvenida a la doctora Morales. Gracias por ser como él. Mira que gracias a la clase que le diste a Matthew está repitiendo con nosotros, está cogiendo otra clase acá. Enteré hoy.
Qué bueno.
Sí, así que gracias. Ok, nada, los dejo. ¿Alguien me tiene que decir algo? ¿No? ¿Le tiene que decir algo? Hay una clase, nos vamos a ir a la del doctor Torres, le escribí por el chat, ¿ok? Así que vamos a la próxima si tenemos acceso. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Bueno. Anyway. No importa eso. Pues ya saben que si necesitan ayuda, tienen a alguien. Es importante ahora, en esta época de distanciamiento social, uno sentirse como un estudiante. So if ever you feel lost, you send me an email, okay? All right. So, let me see how I can. So the CALLA method is a holistic response to the linguistic problem of in the United States, right? Because this originated in the United States, and because there was such a problem that they weren't catering to people's cultural background, that they weren't encouraging students to practice their first language either. So because there are so many issues with foreign students and the English context, and there was this linguistic gap, educators formulated many different frameworks and came up with many different frameworks, and the CALLA method is one of these frameworks. So it's not the only method, there are many different methods, but it is certainly a method that is used a lot in the United States, especially in the Northeast. And there are other methods as well that don't have the same name as CALLA, but also encourage the same idea of teaching English by integrating other subjects. So CALLA targets the entire curriculum and academic language development. So it's interested in science, math, history, etc. And it's interested in developing students' academic language in those areas as well. So it's not just grammar or parts of speech or, you know, writing a well-formed sentence in English, but it's how do we write about the sciences, and how do we write about the sciences across different levels, right? How do we write about the sciences in grade school, in primary school? What sort of language is permissible? What sort of language will the child understand? What's the sentence construction versus, you know, something more advanced, middle school? How do we teach science or geology, right? And then high school, more specialized language. You want them to think about scientific methods and be more critical thinkers with the language, right? So the CALLA method sort of attempts to prepare the student in learning English in these different levels, in different fields, academic fields. So this approach is useful for any stage of the language student, because it's not just about English, it's about different subjects. And because it's about different subjects, it makes it universal. That's the key, right? So it's, how do we make, if the tables were turned, how do we make Spanish memorable? La clase de español. How do we make, you know, imagine you're a Spanish teacher and you're teaching foreigners from the United States to learn Spanish, and they're living in Puerto Rico, where the majority of everything is in Spanish. So how do we facilitate the Spanish class? Do we just teach them Spanish grammar and Spanish literature? No, we could have a disengaged student. So the idea behind CALLA is, okay, yes, we teach grammar and we teach the language class and literature, but we also incorporate history, contemporary issues like race relations, Black Lives Matter, all sorts of things into our classes, and we make our class relevant. So in this sense, it's useful for any language student at any level, because it'll help them become more encouraged to learn English. So whether they are receiving intensive English education in an English immersion classroom, whether they're at a transition stage between, you know, their first language and their second language, or in the early years of learning English as a first language, teaching English through content, even to smaller students through science or history, whatever, could be very meaningful and could make the difference in a student's learning experience. So CALLA targets at both competence and the idea of competence, subject competence and language competence. So subject competence is basically, you know, how you understand a subject. So science and history, it's self-explanatory, versus language competence, so linguistic competence. How do you understand the language, right? So the development of subject competence is tied to success in language competence a lot of the times. And this is something that perhaps some of us take for granted as language teachers. So maybe the reason why a lot of you are here considering being English language teachers, or already having been English language teachers, is because you thought at some point in your life, I'm really good at English, I can be an English teacher, right? Because you don't necessarily have somebody who's bad at English think, I can be an English teacher. So you have to feel comfortable enough to say, I could be an English teacher, right? But the idea is that for us, maybe it's difficult to understand how knowing English has allowed us to understand content in other areas. So to read medicine prescriptions and instructions on the back of a prescription medicine and know what needs to be done, or to read legal documents and know what they mean in English, right? But for a lot of other students that don't have this language competence, they won't have the subject competence if they don't have the language competence. And they could have the language competence, but they could be bad at the subject as well. So you want to make sure that you facilitate both of those areas. So this means that not only English as a second language ESL teachers are important here in this CALLA process. It's not just the role of an English language teacher to facilitate English language learning, but it's a collective effort. So all teachers with English language learners in their classroom need to provide instruction that develops content subject knowledge and English proficiency and literacy. So also, the same way that we say that maybe the English teacher can make the class a little bit more dynamic by adding other subject areas, we can also talk about how content teachers, so teachers that do sciences and history and social sciences, how they can incorporate language competence or a bit of linguistics and sentence structure and vocabulary to their classes. Because as well, we also have the same problem in science classes and history classes where teachers just assume that you understand what the textbook is saying and they just go on about their day giving the explanation or discussing, and the student is at loss. And this is a big issue, especially for students, public school students in Puerto Rico that haven't received a sort of holistic immersion to English education. Some of them, especially those from more disadvantaged backgrounds, won't have the competence to succeed in an English class, even in grade 12. So perhaps a lot of you have, I suppose a lot of you have some experiences like that, or can think about some anecdotes that relate to this. And I would be curious to hear them. If any, just one anecdote I can take. No? Nobody wants to share an anecdote about teaching English and the difficulties that students face in their language acquisition process? No?
Well, I don't have such a range of time when it comes to experience, but I do have one student that comes from a family that are politically against speaking English. So it's kind of hard for me to kind of grasp that I don't know how to explain this. It's kind of weird because you're in Cupeyville is a bilingual school, and the parents described this student in a bilingual school, but they're actually against learning English for their own political reasons. So it's kind of hard for me, and it's very hard for the administration as well. And we have to see sometimes what we say, how we say it, because we don't want to make some controversies with the parents. And that's at least a problem that I have, but it's fine, I guess.
That can happen. In Puerto Rico, English is a loaded language. It's a socially meaningful language, such that like if you hear somebody speaking English in social settings, you're like, ¿qué se cree este? Right?
Yeah, and it's really sad because, as you said previously, English is a very holistic language. We're not only learning English to speak it, we're going inside a culture, and that may happen with any type of language. And I don't know, it's like you said, it's socially charged. Yeah.
It happens with all languages. It just so happens that for Puerto Ricans, it's important that we learn English because of our current circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, thank you so much, Jose. That's a good anecdote. And I think it's very relevant to our situation because it's not just different linguistic competences that we're dealing with, but we're also dealing with differences in attitudes and ideologies. And this can affect language learning motivation a lot as well. So it's kind of targeting if we could find a way to construct a class that makes the student feel included culturally, perhaps we can overcome these ideologies. So for instance, there are a couple of students at the University of Puerto Rico, Maya,
Exactly.
that they are working with making the English curriculum have more representation of Hispanic culture and Puerto Rican
Yep.
identity. So it's different ways that we can make the classroom meaningful and motivate the students. All right, so thank you so much. Back to the material. So CALLA history. CALLA has been elaborated and expanded since its inception. There are many modifications based on scientifically based research, so it's evidence-based. There are multiple language materials developed based on the CALLA model because it started in the 80s. So there's been a lot of research since. Throughout the years, there have been many opportunities to apply the strategies and to provide feedback. A setback is that a lot of the research done under the CALLA framework has largely taken place pre-2010 by the same author and other collaborators. Although I did check and there's a recent volume from her and there's some recent work, but the large bulk of the evidence that she has is pre-2010. Whether that's a problem or not, I don't know. I don't know if the English language learner has changed much since, but definitely now that we're living in different times in the world, we definitely need to think about different teaching strategies to engage our students at distance. That is the huge task for the English teacher right now. And maybe teaching content can help us. Maybe it could be a tool. However, there has been a recent publication of the subject by the same author. Potential reason of this, why people aren't publishing that much on the CALLA method if it's so widely used, because a lot of the people that work in pedagogy are teachers. So they're not as much investigators or researchers, but they're more concerned with the practical components of the English language classroom. So a lot of the people that work on the TESOL are first and foremost educators. This could perhaps explain some lack of empirical research in the United States for the CALLA, but there are other methods as well. So this is just the setback for this particular one, but there are other methods that go under different names that advocate for the same thing. So developed by Anna U. Shamat and J. Michael O'Malley. It's used in approximately 30 school districts in the United States, as well as in several other countries. From my previous class, we sort of concluded that the CALLA method is something that a lot of people do without noticing anyway. So we don't have to explicitly call ourselves CALLA teachers, but it's just, it appeals to common sense and logic. It appeals to the dynamic teacher that's always thinking about different ways to encourage students. So it's not necessarily something unique or new, but what is unique and new and what you can take from this class and take from the book and these authors are the resources that they provide you. So other frameworks of language teaching, so CALLA method is very similar to one in Europe called Content and Language Integrated Learning. So CALLA is useful for both teachers and educators that work in linguistically diverse settings and educators in second language settings in Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, it would also be especially useful because our surroundings are in Spanish. So most day-to-day tasks require us to communicate in Spanish. So obviously the child will acquire Spanish naturally, whereas English, we're a bit limited to those resources. So if we could include other areas as well in the classroom, that would be good. It's based on scientific research in the 80s. Here are some of the sources. Importantly, it's based on theories of learning and cognition. So early work on second language acquisition and the effective language learner. I already said this. And CALLA also takes from other educators' works on integrating content. Other similar frameworks are called integrated language and content, ILC model. So I'm just gonna skip a little bit through this. This is history. And I'm gonna go straight to the 3 components of CALLA. So CALLA as a method has 3 main components for it. 3 main components for the instruction, for its instruction. So the first component is that in order for you to deliver a successful CALLA class, you take from major content subjects. So it's based on content, math, science, history, arts, etc. Second important component is the academic language component and literacy. So it emphasizes the importance of students practicing academic language and not just reading, understanding how to read in science, not just understanding how to write in science, but feeling competent enough to speak academic language. This means perhaps getting rid of some of the features that we use in our social language, like fillers, like the ones that I use sometimes, like or whatever, right? I use them at times stylistically to catch the attention of my students, but the idea is that we want our students to be able to communicate in different styles. So we want them to have this social style that they can incorporate in their everyday life and informal conversations, but we also want them to know how to speak the higher level professional content specific language, because it will aid them a lot in life in understanding things of the world and adulthood and the professional world. So major content subjects, academic language, and CALLA also explicitly instructs learning strategies. So it's not just that the teacher, the English teacher teaching English through content is using different content. It's telling you about vocabulary words and sentence constructions and academic language, but the teacher is also explicitly making room to show you different ways of learning. So maybe you can learn in group work, or peer review work, or maybe you can write a reflection article on something that you learned, or you can track your learning progress by making a small table of what you knew previously, what you didn't know, what you just learned, and how you can apply it to real life. So there are many different ways, Venn diagrams, brainstorming visualizations or bubbles, right? There are many different tools that an educator has. So we want to bring all of these different dynamic tools that are tactile or that provide experiences that encourage critical thinking, like debates. We want to bring them back so that the class is no longer a passive one, but it's one that's, it's the teacher and the student, and it's this negotiation. Can you hear me well? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
It's raining in my way.
Yes.
All right. So topics from the major content subjects are taken from, so how do we select content? So content for the CALLA classroom is taken from standards, school standards. So this is typically handbooks that are published by TESOL. So TESOL has their own standards. El Departamento de Educación in Puerto Rico, they have their own standards available on PDF for you to download that tell you this is what students should be learning at a particular stage. So for an English teacher to construct her class, she may wish to consult these standards, or she may also decide to engage with a content teacher. So you can ask a content teacher, what are you teaching in your class, or have a look at the textbook and then get some ideas from there. So CALLA teachers engage students through content and higher order thinking activities. So they try to pose questions, again, encouraging conversation, a discourse, think out loud activities. These are the ones that, encourage students to speak or communicate their thinking processes, problem solving, etc. So there are different higher order thinking activities. When we say higher order, we mean that they're not cognitively passive. What's something that's low order or kind of passive? Reading, or doing things on your own, individual, like low risk language learning. High risk language learning is when you're asked to really reflect about something or solve an issue, or when your identity and your knowledge is at stake when they ask you something in class. So the second component beyond content is academic language. So it targets all sorts of academic language levels. So you want your student to be good at listening, speaking, reading, and writing. This is an issue that some teachers have, that they focus on the writing aspect in the English class or the reading aspect in expense of listening and speaking, or at the expense. I've also been able to observe certain English language classrooms where the teacher simply just plays a movie and then she sits back and does something else. And then students see movies all the time and are expected to write about them. So that there you have your listening and your writing, but where's your speaking, huh? Where's your academic language development as well? How do we know that the movie is giving the students the necessary academic language that they need to survive, or to encourage them to learn more? So it's a little bit, movies are good, but every now and then. So, but for the CALLA classroom, that wouldn't play well. We want to target all different areas, not just listening or writing. So the focus is on literacy across the content curriculum. Language is the tool that facilitates the learning of subjects. Students are not just learning vocabulary and grammar, but new concepts and skills that require academic language. How to teach academic language? Well, through cognitive demanding activities. So activities that encourage the student to think. So cognitively demanding activities, their learning journey may be assisted through scaffolding. So not just activities like debates and think out louds where you're like talking about your thinking processes, but these activities that require the student to speak out loud also facilitates the teacher from understanding the student's knowledge, because sometimes we'll have the quiet students that you don't really know what's going on in their heads or what they really know. But if you have these activities or group work or even reflection activities, then the teacher can kind of get a sense at where the student is at and be able to intervene if necessary and provide customized feedback according to the result or the outcome of these activities that put the students in the position that they had to be aware of what they know and what they don't know. So you want your student to be in touch with that, to be always thinking about what they understand, what they don't understand, what they know, what they don't know. And to be comfortable enough to verbalize what they don't know. So component 3 is learning strategies. So learning strategies is a central component to the CALLA method. It's based on research on the effective language learner. So students who are mentally active, basically, are effective language learners because they analyze and reflect on their own learning experiences. So when they're reading something, they're able to tie it back to previous knowledge or to personal anecdotal experiences. The successful language learner is able to verbalize and describe their efforts. So they're able to, they have this sense of, these are my gaps. I really struggle with grammar or whatever, and say that to the teacher. Because they are so self-aware of what they know, what they don't know, and they make these linkages, these mental interconnections, because they're always in this active thinking process, they will be able to learn, retain, and use new information more effectively because they're always creating these linkages and filling in the gap when they don't know. So one of the reasons CALLA is cognitively demanding, besides what we've discussed, which is teaching content and the activities that are aimed at facilitating learning strategies, those are two main reasons, right? The teaching of content and teaching of learning strategies, it makes CALLA cognitively demanding, meaning that your brain is actively thinking out how to learn. But one of the things that makes CALLA especially great is that it follows an instructional sequence, una secuencia. It has a sequence as to how to teach in the language classroom. So it relies on heavy scaffolding. So the teacher intervention, teacher monitoring students, student monitoring themselves, right? So this heavy intervention or scaffolding. All right. So we move on to the conceptual framework of CALLA, the CALLA model. Wait, I feel like I already discussed that. Let me have a look. Here we are. All right. More on cognition. So some of the theories that inspired the CALLA method, as mentioned previously, come from theories of and research on memory. How do we retain knowledge and information? Memory is fundamental to all types of learning. So when we talk about working memory, that's the initial stage storage. So initial processing, when we manipulate information, problem solving, reorganizing information, comparing what we already know with new information. It actively manipulates incoming perception. Long-term memory, whether it's this information from the moment, created in the moment, is stored long-term. And it depends, right? It depends on whether it's something that's in the moment, like a memorization task, or whether it's something enduring that passes on to, you know, you remember this for life, or not necessarily for life, but for a long time. So long-term memory relates new information to prior knowledge. That's a good strategy to making that linkage. Also, something that encourages long-term memory is creating an emotional experience or some kind of meaningful language learning experience in the classroom. So field trips, for instance, are good ideas as well. So having an emotional response to new information facilitates long-term memory. So how memory is stored in the long term, at least 5 ways, but we will discuss 2. There are two main types of memories important for us as language teachers: declarative memory and procedural memory. So declarative memory are the things we know, like the facts that we know about things. So it's often conscious, like dates. It's stored in a schemata, so a conceptual map, maybe. So concepts are related and they build on each other and are linked. So examples of declarative memory is knowing the meaning of words, facts, rules, including images and sequences of events. So it's concrete things that you can talk about or declare. Procedural memory is a little bit more tricky and more higher order thinking. Procedural memory can be unconscious as well. So versus declarative, which is often, oh, I know this. Procedural, you may not necessarily know how you know this. It once started as a process that you learned, but then it becomes like automatic. So maybe at first conscious, but then becomes automatic. So examples of procedural memory: speaking fluently and grammatically, reading for comprehension. How do I do this? You know, they tell you if you want to be an effective reader or a fast reader, the best way is to read or keep reading and all sorts of texts. Interacting appropriately in conversation. How will you have somebody who's capable of interacting academically if you always keep them behind the books or writing, right? You have to encourage this procedure. So declarative knowledge can be facilitated by relying on previous knowledge, establishing links. Can you think of any ideas of declarative knowledge?
Well, if we're talking about facts, it can be the world is round.
Good, good. What else? Nadie más? Declarative knowledge, guys. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. Spanish is the main language of Puerto Rico. The sky is blue. I don't know. Declarative knowledge, dates, facts about cooking or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, so it's just things that we know for certain. Meaning of words. Things that we can declare with certainty that we know. So procedural knowledge is established by creating a meaningful link with content. So perhaps practice in goal-oriented work. So procedural knowledge is often encouraged in group work when we're problem solving or we're relying on peers and providing feedback. Procedural knowledge takes longer to know than a fact. It takes practice, but even though it takes practice, because it takes practice, and because a lot of this practice is often with other people or through procedures, it's more likely to be remembered longer than facts. So how do we take this knowledge of memory and how do we apply it to teaching? So by providing opportunities for a student to use learning strategies through different contexts, they can come to proceduralize the strategy or have it become an automatic strategy. So if we provide the space in a language classroom for students to engage in procedural knowledge or procedural practices like group work, peer review, debates, or science projects, you know, things that require time and energy, if we provide the space in our language classroom, it could help the student in terms of learning. It could help them recall that information. Okay, so the content-based curriculum. So we have until las 3:30, ¿verdad? 3:30.
3:25 according to the to my CC.
All right. So let's continue for now. Almost done, and then I'll share with you your assignment. Whatever we don't finish today, of course, we'll finish on the next live class. So there are two basic premises in CALLA. The first one is that content should be the primary focus of instruction. The second is that academic language skills can be taught as the need for them emerges in content. So we kind of integrate academic skills, not forcefully, but according to the subject at hand. So it has to be relevant or related. Content, not language, is what drives the curriculum in this class, okay? So it's not that today we're gonna learn about parts of speech. No, it's today we're gonna learn about tectonic plates, and we're gonna use different parts of speech, or we're gonna also learn about parts of speech, but this class is about tectonic plates, right? So it's integrating language skills. So like we said before, my example of parts of speech, writing or grammar, reading, speaking, listening to content. So it's encouraging these different skills of language competence, and it's also encouraging language awareness so that you're familiarized with the form, function of language, and you develop these skills, awareness and language skills, specifically for the content in place or the content being discussed. So why should we teach content? 4 reasons. The first is that content provides students with an opportunity to develop important knowledge in different subjects. So we're learning about politics or democracy, or we're learning about world wars, or we're learning about biology. Students are able to practice the language functions and skills needed to understand, discuss, read, write about the concepts developed. So they're given the opportunity to practice English, not just in different contexts, but in different ways in the language. One moment, please. Sorry. So we provide the opportunity for them to practice language skills. So that's a second reason. First one, practical knowledge. Second reason, enforces different kinds of language knowledge and skills. Third reason, most students are motivated when they learn something else other than English class. This is especially the case for those rebellious students or students that procrastinate or they don't like, routine. So it's kind of switching up the routine and making it more dynamic and interdisciplinary. So when things become more interdisciplinary, they become more relevant. So it's more likely to have your students be motivated. Number 4 is that content provides a context for teaching students learning strategies that can be applied in content subject classes. So by integrating content of other subjects into your English class, then your student can go to another language classroom like ciencia or matemática, and they won't have problems understanding the textbook or what the teacher is saying, following what she's saying, because you discussed it in English class. Now, I understand that this last reason is more relevant to the context of the United States, because in the United States, all of the classes are in English. In Puerto Rico, it's not the case. Most classes are in Spanish. That means that terminology and all this other content information is in Spanish. So, you know, you may also think about the devil's advocate question, but what if we teach them terminology for science and math and English, but then their classes in Spanish? Wouldn't that confuse them? It wouldn't if you provide them both of the terminologies. But another reason why you should teach content and not think about this idea is perhaps the more relevant one, that in higher education in Puerto Rico, in the University of Puerto Rico and all of the textbooks are in English for content classes. So they rely on publication houses like McGraw-Hill, etc. Versus, you know, textbooks in Spanish are rarely used. So a lot of our terminology for sciences and academia in higher education and in university level is in English. So that is perhaps one of the most direct reasons why content or teaching terminology or teaching subjects in English class would be helpful for the student. Because I have heard about anecdotes in the situation when, you know, students finally come to university and they're taking math or psychology or something, and they can't study from the book because they don't understand, or they don't understand the slides. And the teacher's saying one thing and it's in another language in the material, so would be helpful. So reason number, I think this is out of order. Let me stop share or share. It somehow got out of order. How did it get out of order? So the first reason is knowledge. Yeah, this is building on the first reason. So reason number one, we said that it builds on previous knowledge or prior knowledge in different subjects. So that's the first reason we should teach CALLA, because it builds on prior knowledge. It helps students establish the link between what they know from other classes or what they know from their life experiences with what they're learning now. So again, it's this idea that we're building on knowledge in the brain, that we don't want to be something irrelevant. We want to make English relevant and memorable. We want to make it matter, English class matter. So a way to do this is by building on that knowledge base. So content, subject, topics in ESL curriculum should be authentic. That's another strategy. So again, it's not necessarily that we're taking our content from books, solamente from books, but we can also take it from everyday lives, from the news, from Puerto Rico. So teach, how can we teach science in a memorable way, or teach about landscapes and landforms, maybe going on field trips. So effective teachers discover what students already know about a subject and build on this previous knowledge. It's also helpful to have a first day, like we did today, where I asked you some questions that made you all laugh because you said we already all know each other and we already know our interests and where we're from. But for me, it's useful because now I know for my subsequent classes that if something comes up and I remember one of you, then I'm like, I know the knowledge base or the experience of Jose, right? Then I can cater to Jose or talk about, you know, something in relation to his background, or Aisha, right? So all students need content-based curriculum that builds on their prior knowledge in their first language. This is important. First language is important, but developing academic English is also important. So it's not that English substitutes Spanish ever, And this is the fear that many people have in Puerto Rico as well, the example that was mentioned previously, but that we encourage an equal vision of the importance of both languages. And I think there's a danger on swinging on any side of the pendulum. And this is especially tricky within the social setting of Puerto Rico, right? Because on one side, you have the advocates of Spanish-only education. On the other side, you have people saying English only will be the only way that people become fully bilingual. And people in the middle ground, there's not that many because there's this idea that middle ground doesn't really work. So, you know, it's definitely the case that we need to find a way to change the rhetoric and the discourse around learning English, that we build our curriculum and our classes in a way that we give importance to both of them and say, but this is English class, right? But that's an institutional change more than a classroom change. But that's a big issue on the island. So the idea is not that, you know, that the first language is erased, but that we find a way to teach the second language. And you can even ask students if they are learning English for the first time or they're struggling with English to say what they know in Spanish, and then you help them learn how to say it in English, or you get a peer that's stronger in English to help them figure it out, right? So in that way, they're establishing links. So there are ways of, you know, building on prior knowledge, that where prior knowledge is your first language. So we're building on Spanish and we're adding English by forming links between Spanish and English, okay? Reason 2 for teaching CALLA is the procedure. So students need to practice skills and processes or procedural knowledge in content subjects. So helping them think about procedures in English would also be very helpful and relevant. So some of the examples that we may use for this is oral and written observations. So we ask our students to do observations or descriptions, classifications via visualizations like the one you see projected on the screen, demonstration, analysis, interpretation, evaluation. So all of these are different procedural knowledge skills. Evaluation is a procedure, interpreting and analyzing. So use of procedural knowledge helps them apply the concepts or information based from their declarative knowledge and diminishes the recitation of facts. That's the most important thing. This is why, you know, we want to include declarative knowledge, but we also want to have something more dynamic, like a play. A play could be dynamic because it goes beyond the boring English class into something that the student has an active role. So it leads to extensive and interactive hands-on experiences. Anything that's tactile, performative is good. Anything that gives a student a sort of sense of purpose, a goal, or identity. Reason number 3, motivation. So as we said before, teaching something other than English kind of breaks away from the traditional English classroom. So it makes it more interesting to students that are more into math, history, or social studies, or even art. So students that are into art or movies. The student is motivated to learn about the specific topic because we're talking about more relevant stuff. So it can make the difference between someone who's active and exercising their procedural knowledge and, you know, is very engaged versus somebody who's just listening to, I don't know, Shakespeare. Shakespeare's a little bit more advanced for the student, but who is sleeping because they don't care. So they are doing real schoolwork, so it's relevant to other classes instead of merely just learning English. And reason number 4 why to teach CALLA is the learning strategy component of CALLA instruction. As we said before, the CALLA teacher brings with her a toolkit of learning strategies. So how can I help my student become a better learner? And I think that's something that's a lot of teachers don't do. And they just look at the student as a number or a blank slate, and they don't help the student or equip the student with useful tips on how to learn, on how to be better with English. And again, you know, targeting at cognition and memory and meaningfulness of learning, always keeping that in mind. Will this interest my student? Will help in establishing learning strategies. So this is, you know, a learning strategy, relating concepts together, making a sort of diagram. So can you think of any learning skills? Hello. I can't see you.
Singing, we can use songs and music. That's a good strategy for learners,
That's true.
little learners.
Yeah, that's very, very true. What else?
Especially when we use the rap song.
Rap songs?
I don't know, but I like debates.
Debates? Are you with higher learners, Bella? Like secondary school?
I have like both. Right now, yes, I'm in middle school. But at least when I was teaching math, it was some kind of competition. I just put them up front, like who gets more points doing this or that exercise. That's what I used to do. It was a good way to motivate them to do the exercise in the books.
Yeah, I support Lisa. I share Lisandra's strategy. I mean, that's in my case. I have done it a little differently. So I put the debates with regards to any of the topics that we're talking about in class, but the goal is to turn, like whoever is speaking on behalf of each team has to have enough evidence and enough substantial textual evidence from the readings, and their goal is to turn the people from the other team into their team. So, but everything has to be textual evidence. And in this case, for example, this week we were talking about leadership, which is one of the units that I have to cover. And the debate was surrounding who is more powerful, the leader or the follower.
I like
and
that.
it was mind-blowing. I mean, I was aiming for something a little more basic, but the things that those kids came up with, they brought up so many social issues that I was totally oblivious from, and I was like, what's going on here? I don't know if this is getting out of hand, but I mean, that's the purpose, no?
That's cool. That's a good topic. It's a good topic. Anyone else? Learning strategy, debates, singing?
I like to make oral reports about things they like. Your favorite movie, your favorite actor, your favorite music, and if they like it, so they will do it. That's important for shy students.
They talk about things that they're passionate about.
Yes.
That's good. I like that idea. Okay, so for your first assessment, I'm just pulling up the rubric right now. I know we're a little bit over time, but I just want to discuss it really quickly. If I can find it. Okay. All right. So this is your first assessment, and I will be sending you a copy of the rubric here. Right. Where's the sharing button? So for your first assessment, this is the syllabus that I was telling you about. That's 15 pages. I'm going to be sending that to you once we hang up. So the specific instructions, we're basically building on the idea of teaching, learning strategies, but more from an anecdotal experience. So I don't necessarily want you to tell me about what you learned today yet, but I want you to tell me more about strategies that you use, or you, if you have never taught before, you could use, you envision yourself using in an English class. It's more of a, I guess, reflection exercise of how you would go about doing this. So do you know what learning strategies your students are already using? So that's, and if you haven't taught, you can say students use based on your previous experiences. What have you observed, or based on your own experience, because we're all learners. Okay, so also based on your own. And what have your students told you about the ways that they like to learn? So based on these questions, based on this prompt, you answer the following questions. So what do they like to learn? Like learning new vocabulary. What strategies? Listening for information, reading comprehension, viewing, writing, understanding graphic information using graphic organizers, oral reporting, remembering a sequence, and information. If you struggle in any of these, you can also, if you struggle thinking about a plan or something that you would do, you can also look up ideas online, okay? And it's worth, I don't think it's worth that much. This is worth 20 points, I think. It was worth 20 points. It's worth 20 points. And the deadline is the 22nd. And as you know, or maybe you don't know, or you know, we're also encouraged to be lenient or flexible. So if you have any personal issues and aren't able to meet this particular deadline, I would want you to let me know as soon as possible if you have internet issues. But these deadlines are set in place because then the assignments could potentially pile up if you don't keep up with them. So they're there to help you out, to help you do the best you can, right? So that's why they're there, to sort of help you structure yourself. And they're in the rubric, sharing it now. The criteria goes from 4 to 1. You need a kind of an introduction to sort of set the stage. It's analytical essay format. And so they're discussion questions. So this means that if you use bullet points, you could be marked down, because I'm looking to see that you're able to engage with the subject, talking about it at length, like perhaps per question, 4 to 5 sentences with examples, and make sure that your grammar is good. So you'll be graded in terms of the introduction, your understanding of the question. Are you answering it? Assigned question, required questions are completely answered and supported by ideas. So you're answering the entirety of it, not just understanding it, but you're doing what's expected from you. Quality of responses. So in terms of, here is in terms of stylistics, grammar. And well, actually this is proofreading and writing, stylistics, grammar, quality of responses. This is in terms of content. So it's that you're not being lazy and copying things online or something that somebody else said, or, you know, kind of like regurgitating what I said, but that you're really sort of being an analytical thinker. So content, writing and proofreading, you're answering the whole question, you're demonstrating understanding and introduction. So all of that builds into 20 points. All right. And it's really make sure that your grammar is on point, because if you have more than 2 to 3 grammatical errors, you could get marked down. Not too much, but yeah. Okay.
Professor, I have a question before we go. So with regards to the format we are supposed to answer from, are we required to give extended essay-like responses per question, or?
Essay-like, no, just extended short, like short paragraph. So
okay.
Like 5 sentences per question.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Should we do like a paragraph per question, or can we like join them?
Paragraph per question. Any other questions? You look concerned, Brenda.
Wait. The introduction is about the introduction, and then I start.
About the subject of learning strategy.
It's one for all the work. Okay.
Okay. You good, Aisha?
We have to copy the question, then the answer, like in a paragraph.
That would be helpful because it'll help me keep track. And if you double space it, it'll also be helpful. I like double space. Yeah?
Okay.
You sound like you're good?
We can do question and answer.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how I was gonna ask that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the same goes to the introductory question, Professor?
Yeah. And
okay.
Also, let me go back to the syllabus a little bit. Let me see if I can find it.
So it would be, in practical words, 11 question and answer exercises.
Perhaps, but the first one counts as introduction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's Q&A, extended response. Where I'm gonna share again the thing. To include a title page. This is important. Title front page with required information. What required information, you may ask? That's meant to be up here.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if you have a specific format for the title page.
Here's some information about plagiarism.
Professor, with regards to the cover page, is it supposed to be APA formatted?
Here we go.
Okay.
All right, so title page. This
Okay.
is on page 4 of the syllabus. So title front page information. So you can say module 1 or the title of the activity, CC emblem logo centered front first page, title of the assignment on the middle. So the logo first, then title of the assignment, then your name, course code, and then my name and the submission date, like that. Logo, title, your name, course, me, submission date. And here you have spacing for responses, leave double space, content information. I'm gonna change this to double space. I like double space. Give me double space always. It helps me. It gives my mind more peace. Use Times New Roman font size 12. If you know APA, that's great, use APA. I wasn't allowed to say use APA in summer school because I think that some students weren't too familiar with it, and they're offering courses and tutorials on how to do the latest APA. But because we have so much time,
We've been practicing, Professor.
Yeah.
We have to do all of our work of other classes in ABA.
Yeah, I'm a linguist, so please use APA. Please use APA if you, and I will, because we have a longer semester, I'm also gonna be, actually, I'm gonna write that down. I'm also gonna be uploading APA stuff. So tutorials, and a good website that I suggest is one by the University of Purdue, OWL Purdue. They have nice guidelines on APA. It's always my go-to, but also when in doubt, if you're using Google Scholar, there are certain techniques that help you cite as well. So I'm just gonna give an example here. So let's say we are in, how do I share screen? Google Scholar, right? That's me. You look up an article or whatever, if you use Google. I don't know if you use Google Scholar. Do you use Google Scholar? Never? To look for papers? You don't need to look for papers if you don't want to. But the point is, if you click on this, it'll give you the APA citation. Okay, nice. And for us, it's Shamat, CALLA book. This is an old version, but here's the APA citation. The suggestion is not always right, so you want to double check with a manual, but a lot of the times it's pretty correct. So usually it's standard practice that the date is in parentheses. Our book is 2009. These are the authors. Obviously this M should be capitalized. The title of the book needs to be in italics. This is the city of publication, and here's the publication company following the 2 points. So that's pretty standard. If you didn't know that you could do that, now you do. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you so much for joining me. It was nice meeting you all, and I hope you have a nice Saturday.
Thank you, you too.